Do you know who Ser Duncan the Tall truly was? Even though the realm remembers him as nothing more than a wandering hedge knight, people say he was lucky, that history brushed past him by accident, that he merely stood beside greatness without shaping it, a man who stumbled into history by accident, trailing behind kings and princes without ever realizing where his feet were taking him. That, of course, is the story people prefer. It comforts them to believe that greatness must announce itself loudly, with banners, titles, and bloodlines written in ink older than memory. But the truth, my friends, the truth is far more unsettling. Because Ser Duncan the Tall was dangerous, not because he sought power, but because he never did. Duncan came from nothing. No castle warmed his childhood, no maester sharpened his mind. He learned his letters late, his manners never. He slept beneath wagons, ate what others left behind, and carried his whole life on his back. And yet, he learned something most lords never do. He learned how the world looks from below. He saw small folk, not as numbers to be taxed or bodies to be spent, but as people hungry, frightened, hopeful people, whose suffering did not vanish simply because a king was crowned elsewhere. That alone made him unusual. But what made him truly dangerous was that he refused to forget it. When Duncan took his knightly vows, and yes, despite what some whisper, he did take them in his own way. He believed them. Protect the weak, defend the innocent, stand against injustice. Words most knights recite as ceremony, then fold away like old cloaks once they acquire land and comfort. Duncan wore those words like armor, and armor, as you know, is not meant to be comfortable. It is meant to be heavy, restricting, demanding. Consider how many times Duncan could have stayed silent, and did not. When princes abused their power, he spoke. When lords humiliated the defenseless, he acted. When violence hid behind banners and birthright, he stepped forward, even when every sensible voice told him to step back. And each time, the realm held its breath, because this was not how the game was played. You see, power in Westeros survives on understanding the rules, and more importantly, on knowing when to ignore them. Duncan never learned that lesson. He treated princes as men, kings as fallible, and laws as promises rather than tools. That made him infuriating to those who ruled, and invaluable to those who followed. Then there was the boy, the bold, sharp-tongued child who called himself Egg. A prince hiding in plain sight, watching the world not from a throne, but from the mud beside Duncan's boots. Egg learned from Duncan what no maester could teach him. He learned that authority does not make a man right, that birth does not excuse cruelty, that a king who forgets his people is already halfway to losing them. Duncan never set out to shape a king. He simply lived in such a way that the boy had no choice but to watch and learn. Ask yourself this: how many men have stood so close to power without reaching for it? Duncan was offered lands, titles, comfort. He accepted duty instead. He remained a knight of the road, even when the road led straight through the halls of kings. Because Duncan understood something the rest of us struggle to remember. Power does not reveal character. It tests it, and Duncan passed every test by refusing to play. Even in failure, he was instructive. He was beaten, mocked, imprisoned, threatened with death more than once for doing what was right rather than what was wise. Yet the realm bent around him. Because there are moments, rare, fragile moments, when one honest man, standing upright, forces the world to reveal its own crooked spine. History will remember Duncan as the Tall, as if height were his defining trait. But height is merely what made him visible. What truly set him apart was that he refused to bow his soul, even when his body had no choice. He did not change the realm by conquest. He did not write laws or command armies. He changed it by reminding it what it had sworn to be. And that, my friends, is why Ser Duncan the Tall still matters. Not because he wore white cloaks or sat beside kings, but because he proved something terrifyingly simple. That one man, armed with nothing but decency, can unsettle a world built on compromise. And that is a lesson far more dangerous than any dragon. So the question remains, whispered in taverns and libraries alike. Was Dunk actually a knight? Not by the neat standards of the Citadel. No parchment survives bearing his anointing. No lord proudly claims the moment his sword touched Duncan's shoulder. No witnesses stand ready to swear the words were spoken correctly. And in Westeros, absence of proof is often treated as proof of absence. But that, I'm afraid, is a luxury reserved for those who have never needed a knight. You see, knighthood was never meant to be ink and ceremony. It was meant to be conduct. Long before vows were standardized, before septons polished the ritual, a knight was simply a man who chose restraint when violence was easy, and courage when fear was sensible. By that measure, most anointed knights fail the test daily. Dunk did not. Ask yourself this. When a knight turns away from injustice because the offender wears a crown, is he still a knight? When a knight beats the small folk because he knows no one will stop him, does the sword at his hip sanctify the act? If vows are spoken but never lived, are they anything more than noise? Dunk never learned to hide behind words. He lived them. He defended a puppeteer with no name worth remembering. He risked his life against princes who could have ended him with a gesture. He stood between cruelty and its victims even when the law stood against him. Not because it would earn him praise, not because it would make him powerful, but because he believed, perhaps foolishly, that a knight who does not protect the weak has no business calling himself one. And yes, there were moments when Dunk doubted himself. He worried about his birth, his training, the missing ceremony. Men obsessed with titles always do. But notice this. It was never the people he protected who questioned him. To them, the answer was obvious. When danger came, Dunk stood. When others looked away, Dunk acted. When mercy cost him dearly, Dunk paid the price. That is knighthood stripped to its bones. There is a reason Egg never asked, "Are you truly a knight?" He already knew, because children recognize truth faster than courts ever do. So was Dunk actually a knight? By law, perhaps not. By tradition, debatable. By blood, certainly not. But by purpose, by sacrifice, by the quiet, exhausting choice to do what is right, even when it hurts, there was no truer knight in the Seven Kingdoms. And that, I think, is what troubles history most. Because if Dunk was a knight without permission, then perhaps knighthood was never something to be granted at all. Perhaps it was always something to be earned.